This is a Culture Inject production.
Hello everyone, welcome again to the Nevers podcast, where we review and dissect every episode of the Nevers. Thank you so much for your support, and thank you to each of you who has left a review. The way that people find the podcast is by reading reviews, and particularly on Apple Podcasts. So thank you so much to those who have gone to Apple Podcasts and contributed. And if you would like to help us out as well, please do the same. Go to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review, and write a few kind words about us. It's very much appreciated. And speaking of reviews, here's one from J9 at Sea, who left a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. So far, much prefer your podcast than the Touch podcast. Enjoy your commentary and insights. I find that after listening to your podcast, I go back and rewatch the episode. It's very interesting to see all the little bits and pieces that I missed, so thank you for the review. So today we're back to review episode 5, titled Hanged. Joining me to discuss this episode is Chirag.
Hey, what's up, the Nevers fam?
You can stream the Nevers podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Amazon Podcasts, YouTube, and anywhere else that you can stream podcasts. Any comments, questions, or interview requests can be sent to theneverspodcast@gmail.com. A little housekeeping. So the Nevers podcast continues to climb the Apple Podcast charts. We had over 10,000 downloads last month, and we're looking to surpass that number for May, as we've already surpassed 7,000 downloads as of recording this episode. Our episodes have been averaging 2,000 downloads per episode, so thank you to our listeners for tuning in every week and for the positive feedback that you've been giving us. We really appreciate it, and we're glad that you're enjoying listening to us. So before we get into our review and analysis of this week's episode, we have a listener-submitted voice recording from Scarlett Walker, so let's give that a listen.
Hi, this is Scarlett Walker from Birmingham, Alabama. Big fan of the pod and big fan of the Nevers. So I have a theory about Amalia's turn and just Amalia's story. So, towards the beginning of episode 4, Amalia and Penance have a conversation where Penance says something along the lines of, "I can't imagine how many funerals you've been to." And Amalia replies, "None. We don't have those when I come from. We don't have enough time and we don't have enough ground." She doesn't say, "We don't have those where I come from." It's when I come from. I rewatched it many times with subtitles. It's definitely when. So I think she's from another time period, and I think she's from the future. And because she's from the future, when she was touched, she gained the turn of being able to see into the future. She gained the turn of the ripplings. Also, definitely sensing some alien spacecraft stuff, because the fact that she says we don't have enough time and we don't have enough ground, to me that says they're always either time traveling, flying around in that ship, some combination of the two, and because they are always traveling so quickly and they're on this ship, they don't have any ground to bury people in. So, just a theory.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I touched on last week, wasn't it? That I picked up that she said when instead of where. And I also, that leads me to believe that she's possibly from the future. There's a few bits that I'll pick up on from this episode 5 that also lead me to believe that. Are you on board with that now?
Yeah, I think all the people with their theories are also seeing into the future. I think they all have their own ripplings. You called it. I think it's an interesting insight, and I think a few other people had it, that because Amalia is from the future, that she can see into the future, because it kind of, whatever power it was that administered these powers is kind of enhancing what already is there.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me. So let's read the synopsis for this episode. So this is episode 5, called Hanged. It aired on May 9th, 2021. The synopsis is as follows. As the city buzzes with anticipation over a pending execution, Penance, played by Anne Skelly, grapples with a moral calling at odds with Amalia's plan. With the two women at a crossroads, the orphans must decide whom to follow. Cast and crew, all the usual players, introducing no one new. Written by Melissa Iqbal, directed by Joss Whedon, and initial impressions.
So I really enjoyed this episode. It was so much to get through and so there's so much happening that, I got to the end and felt like I need to watch this again, which I did. And I guess if I'm to pick my favourite moments from this episode, I really liked seeing Penance have a really strong view and her really kind of fighting for that. And I liked seeing the relationship between her and Amalia. I feel like it was a point where, it could have been a real fight between them, a whole civil war type thing, but they handled it very well and still with humour, and it was just perfect. I also like seeing a lot of character development and a lot of just crazy reveals going on. Everything was happening, and because it was set, I didn't realise at first that it's set, a month or 5 weeks or so after the end of the last episode, until Amalia mentions it later on. So it's kind of like everybody knows what's going on and seems to have everything underhand, and we're kind of watching as viewers not really knowing. But I found it really, really interesting.
Yeah, we're a bit of a step behind. This episode for me is all about Malady. Malady. She really graduates into Sinister. I think like she legitimately comes out on top over everyone's heads, and then just really like lavishes in the chaos she created. I think like she cackles maniacally like the Joker in the very end, taking off her wig. Yeah, I really loved it. And I think her biggest victory in this episode, sorry, going back to the religious parallels, but I think her biggest victory here was successfully playing out the Jesus arc for herself, because as we know from her Effie Boyle performance, she kind of does see herself as a savior for the touched. Like she says, the only one showing the human side of the touched is herself. And we see the Parliament power people like Lord Masson. They see her as a threat to their order, to their status quo. Just like the church establishment saw Jesus as a threat to their order. And then the people of London are kind of all riled up and demanding her public crucifixion. And then she's killed, in quotation marks, and she'll resurrect herself maybe 3 days later. I love the parallels there and how she managed to kind of make herself into that figure. And then before we started this review, like a couple days ago, I just glanced a little bit at what Reddit was saying, and let me tell you, like I feel like just as an audience at this point, we're a render farm of absolutely every conceivable idea that could possibly exist. So there's genuinely nothing a story can do these days, or a TV show, that the fans have not already fan theoried to some extent. So I know there were some people who were saying like they called it that on the internet, that the real Effie Boyle was dead and Malady was doing the double role. I did not see that coming at all. So like I peripherally noted the Effie Boyle's visual and voice similarity to Malady, but I didn't really think much of it. So the twist like gave me whiplash. It was really effective.
I feel like I watched the as soon as she came up in this episode, I noticed straight away she sounds exactly like Malady. And as soon as it went in closer, I was like, oh, it is her. So I'm like wondering what's going on, whether it's something crazy going on or whether she just switched places. But I went back and watched episode 3 or 4, where she first shows up and realised that it's her, but it wasn't as notable in that previous episode. But yeah, it was really great. It was really fantastically done.
Yeah. And I also wanted to mention that I saw someone mention the scene where Malady rescues Harriet as a kind of a metaphor, like a girl lying face down on broken glass while people trample over her. Just like the apathy of an uncaring, self-interested society, and that's something that Malady can empathize with. So I really enjoyed that insight, and I think we are kind of on the path to her self-actualization. Like, as we've seen from her Effie Boyle performance, she can be cunning, she can be sinister, she can have an agenda that she strategically pushes forward. She's a trickster, a chaos maker, kind of like a Loki of this world. I think she's a valuable force that's going to come to a head soon.
Definitely.
Dive into some discussion.
Yeah, we'll go straight into the discussion. So, moving through the episode, we open up with the glowing orb cracking open a little bit. And I don't know if we're meant to be worried or scared, anticipating what it is and what is going to happen if this thing fully opens up and does something. Still not, even after this episode, no clue. No one seems to know. But we'll find out at some point, I'm sure. And then we go straight to Amalia and Horatio to see that they're definitely still in the throes of this affair, which is kind of unexpected because from where we left off, they were kind of talking about, or at least Horatio was saying about how it's a mistake and it's not something that he wants to be thinking about or doing anymore. And then here we see. So, I was a little bit shocked, actually.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the opening. So, the opening, like, fluidly cuts between, like you mentioned, the orb cracking, and then Amalia and Horatio's affair, and then Malady's execution verdict. And then we see a prostitution appointment in the orphanage with Desiree and some boy. And the connective tissue throughout all of this is Penance's reaction to it all. She's a very honest, transparent character, and I think she's in this episode, she's wrestling with the contrast between her idealism, her inner child, and the very adult, violent, unforgiving world in which she lives. Like, she doesn't want to build weapons of destruction, but the world hangs nooses outside her door, and she's not used to dealing with men or her sexuality. And throughout this episode, we see her kind of confronted with like possibly negative, destructive forms of sexuality, like infidelity, prostitution, bird watching. She's like a Disney character living in a Game of Thrones world, and I think that informs her thematic journey here in very interesting ways. And I feel like her decision to save Malady comes from her hanging on to her idealism, desperately clutching to it in the face of the rising black tide of violence and despair and utter annihilation. All things that Amalia kind of already accepts. You know, she's down with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is kind of focused on her reaction to everything, because she is kind of taken her, and similarly with Augie, I see them as the kind of innocence of the show. They're, I don't know, they seem untainted, and yeah, she's in this world where all of this stuff is going on, and it is interesting to see her reach that point where she cracks, just like the orb underground, and realises she needs to really stand up and do something, and take charge of the situation. So yeah, it's really interesting. Right,
and I think it's mentioned a little bit later that it's no coincidence that the orb is cracking on the same evening that Malady is being executed.
Yes.
So it seems like there's some kind of conscious will at play here, that whatever entity is in that orb is expressing disapproval of Malady being executed, I think. And the conflict that happens later on in this episode between Penance and Amalia, where Penance wants to go rescue Malady, while Amalia wants to go rescue the Gallanthy. It's interesting that Penance is actually doing the bidding of the Gallanthy by prioritizing Malady as opposed to Amalia, who's just kind of straightforward going for the Gallanthy. But I guess that's a point to unpack a little bit later. We can move on to the scene where Lord Masson and his associates are meeting to discuss Malady's execution. So we have Prince Albrecht. I didn't pronounce his name properly. So the prince thinks it's barbaric, while the others believe it's necessary. It's suggested that the prince's daughter might be one of the afflicted, and that's why he's sympathetic to the touched. During one conversation, it's reaffirmed that pain gives Malady power and strength. Another big revelation is that Lord Masson and his cohorts are responsible for Mary's death. This is a quote. We showed our hand sicking that ghastly gunman Cruz on Mary Brighton. Wow.
Yeah, this scene alone was a lot to unpack. So I think the whole episode actually very dialogue heavy, very like I said, had to kind of rewatch to take everything in fully. I mean, there's so much going on just in this alone. So we're told that they've got this new Blue Badge Act.
Right, the registration.
Yeah, so I mean that's already, like I said, we're only a month within a month. All of this has already happened. So within a month, the government's decided that all touch need to be registered, which is a scary prospect because that gives them power over them. You know.
Right. It's very pre-Holocaust.
Yeah, it's just it's scary. It's and for the touched especially, but also you can see with Prince Albrecht, it's like if his daughter is touched, you know, he's part of both worlds and he's trying to both protect his family and also not be pushed out of a position of power where he may be able to influence and change the touched lives for the better. But obviously in any way that he's doing that, even here they just think that his daughter might be touched and they're already kind of shutting him out of the scene. Right,
and to kind of megaphone some of the theories out there, who is it that brings up the fact that the prince's daughter is touched other than Lord Masson himself, who a lot of people are thinking that maybe his daughter is touched.
Yes.
So that's an interesting tidbit. What did you think about the revelation that it's Masson who was responsible for Mary Brighton's death?
I think that it's crazy that we're given this information so kind of offhandedly. And I think it's like that with a lot of information in this episode. So obviously we were kind of talking, you know, is it Lavinia? And I was thinking that it probably was. And we were kind of with the interrogation with Masson and Amalia, he basically owned up to it. So to have it, you know, 100% confirmed, it was him.
Yeah, we were totally wrong. Yeah, we were Amalia false.
I don't know if I'm with you. I know you're saying that I'm trying to hang on to this like shred of hope for Lavinia. So maybe that was probably my way of thinking, oh, if she at least was in charge of Mary's death, I've got something to kind of really dislike her for. Because now after this episode, I'm kind of like back on the Lavinia kind of with her. Still, the things that she's doing are very questionable, but I feel like I'm kind of now back on Team Lavinia.
Well, as far as Masson being responsible, it goes into that whole the state orchestrated murder, the barbarity of the well-off. Now that that's been revealed, I can at least feel comfortable saying that Masson has, at least story-wise, become almost irredeemable. I initially had a little bit of sympathy for him based on what we saw happen to his daughter, But now that that's been called into question and we don't really know what the fate of his daughter exactly is, I think maybe he's being set up to be the bigger villain than Lavinia. But I still disagree with you about Lavinia a little bit, and we're gonna discuss her pretty thoroughly a little bit later. So moving on to the next scene, we have Amalia and Penance form their plan to get underground to the glowing orb, which we now know is called the Gallanthy. So how do you feel about everyone talking about the Gallanthy like they knew about it all along? There's no big build-up to this.
Yeah, again, I've touched on it a couple of times, but I feel like that's a running theme with this episode, is that we're completely behind. These guys have had a month to, I guess, learn about everything and take it all in. So they're talking about it like it's, something that's always existed and they know it's there and it's just totally normal. Whereas for us, we're just like, Gallanthy this, Gallanthy that, what? It's strange because for us it's something that's completely otherworldly and we still don't know about it, and they're just talking about it like it's nothing.
I was just saying, I think we're supposed to be playing catch up, just like one step behind, because if we were one step ahead of the characters, we wouldn't really care about them as much, or the plot. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's great though, because in most other TV shows, once there's a discovery, I feel like you get, how most superhero films are, this is how this person came to be. You get that background story on them and that's how it starts. I like the ones where it just dives into their lives straight away, because you've seen the how they were made story 1,000 times or read it in the comic books. You don't need it. You can jump straight into the action. And this is doing that. We're right there in the action.
I don't know what you're talking about. Batman's origin is a mystery to me.
Do you know what I mean? You've seen it so many times. Why do we need another one? So it's nice for them to just jump in and we're there with them, not knowing what's going on, but we're not just having it like spoon-fed to us and over-explained, like someone having a bit of dialogue that's like, oh, by the way, the Gallanthy is blah, 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 But just talking about this scene in general, I like how, I just love how Penance is. I love all the acting in this show is so natural, and I find it really easy to watch, and the comedy for me is so just there, it's not forced at all. So Penance having the different names for her inventions that never quite fall right. It's like, well, no, this is just an X-ray. It's like, no, it's a spectral occult.
She keeps trying to have like creative names.
Yeah. She's trying to be really cool with it, but it's just not working. So moving on to some Lavinia action. We see Lavinia visiting the digging site again. This is quite a nice scene because this is the first time we're seeing more of Dr. Haig. So Lavinia orders Dr. Haig to kill it before it kills everyone else. She's very on edge in this scene. She's clearly very scared of this glowing entity. There are plans to remove the Gallanthy from the underground site to a bunker outside of the city. She wanted to reverse engineer a cure for the touch, but now she believes that dream was naive. She's obviously worried about going any further with that because she thinks that this thing might, destroy the whole of London and kill everyone. They talk, and then at the end of the scene we see that the shop assistant touches a bucket underneath and it floats, so we see that she has her powers still. And she gives a look that kind of implies that she is with it, kind of knows what's going on, and I don't know if that's going to mean possible escape or something along those lines.
My theory is uprising. I don't know if lobotomies heal, but I think maybe they're gonna use their powers to maybe set the Gallanthy free or do something.
Yeah, or is maybe the Gallanthy giving them, like, strengthening their powers that the Doctor's trying to take away?
Oh,
could
healing.
Be.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, just thought about that when you said that. But it's interesting to see more of Lavinia and the Doctor together.
Was it just me, or was the Doctor and Lavinia's interactions like weirdly sensual and touchy? Because Lavinia is so vulnerable in that scene, and the Doctor is kind of comforting her and touching her leg, and You know, they're heavily looking into each other's eyes.
Yeah, I did wonder if there's been something there before. Yeah, it was very... I think the whole episode was kind of like that. We got a lot of action going on and a lot of more in-depth looks at people's more vulnerable sides and their emotional states. But yeah, it was nice to see Lavinia not with her head screwed on almost. You know, she's panicking. And I'm kind of more, you know, I'm still there. I'm on a level with Lavinia where I'm kind of like, okay, she seems to have been doing this to try and help the people and protect the people. What she's doing to the Touched is horrible and horrific. But if that's the only way that her and this doctor think they can, you know, find either a cure for the Touched or at least get this thing out of London to save people, you kind of, you know, there's a reason there.
Right, like there's a means to an end or something like that. The doctor does mention that it's more a chrysalis than egg, which means it's transforming into something. He says from liquid into, and then he kind of drops it, but we don't know yet. But I think that probably means that it's not humanoid. And if Amalia is presumably acquainted with it, my question is, why didn't she understand its language when Mary was singing it? I'm not sure. It's there's a cloud of confusion over the whole thing for me. I'm not quite as able to look into the future as the folks on Reddit.
So then we go back to the orphanage. We see the returning orphans disposing themselves of their blue badges, the little ribbons that we'd seen earlier on in episode 2 at the party, which we now know the bigwigs are making them wear, making them be registered. We then have the article on Malady written by Effie Boyle, which Desiree's reading out, which is, you know, a little bit of comedy there because she's not the strongest reader. Everyone's in the courtyard. I like how they say she's terribly compelling, which is humorous on watching it a second time because you know that it's Malady that's written this. So for them to be reading it in a way that they're connecting to, you're thinking they're connecting to this person who they shouldn't necessarily be, even though she's touched, she's a murderer and everything, so it's really interesting. We also see Bonfire and Nimble practicing their powers on each other, which I love because it's almost the first time we've seen people just playing with their powers, with their turns. They're training and using them in a real way that is the first time we've seen really like their superpowers.
I think Nimble explains to the audience why they suddenly trust her as part of the group.
Yeah.
Because a month has passed and she's there. I thought that was a little, too expositional. But it was fine, you know. I like her powers. She adds an interesting dynamic to the group. Oh, sorry, I think she mentions that Nimble is a boy, not a girl.
Yeah, it says men are the men, we are...
Right.
Yeah. Also, we get a couple interesting things. So they're talking about the Galanthe again, and we have no info on that still. The writing, she writes, it's a crack in the soul of the city. So that again is another moment where you're like, okay, that's a crack, just like in the Galanthe. And I like it because, again, at the time, you don't know it's Malady that's written it, but then when you find out it's Malady, it's like she knows that the Galanthe is there as well.
And Malady is a good journalist, damn it. She's really good.
She's got away with words.
And then we see Harriet's impassioned, they're hanging Malady for being touched. And then it cuts to the touched are now having to register with the city and are being directed to wear the blue ribbons at all times. So we're going back to that very pre-Holocaust thing of these people are in danger. They're being identified and targeted, registration, all that kind of stuff. We see Effie Boyle again, who is hounding Mundy for an interview with Malady, which he repeatedly refuses. So
yeah, I mean, this whole scene, like I said earlier, was just great. When I first watched it, I just thought to myself, oh, that really sounds like Malady, like Amy Manson. And I couldn't remember much of her first appearance in the previous episode. So I wasn't, like, I remember really not paying super close attention to who the actress was. So then here, I was like, oh, that really sounds like her. What's going on? It wasn't until she entered the office and you get a closer look, I was like, no, that is definitely her with like some fake teeth and stuff going on. So for her to be there in the midst of the police when they, you know, before they're looking for her and now they think they've got her incarcerated. She even, on my second watch, going back, having 100% confirmed that it was Malady, she points at the photo of the real Effie Boyle. And he says, murder victim. Obviously she knows because she must have been the one to kill her. She says that she has that same coat. She's literally there telling him that she knows who it is and that she's stolen her identity, and he is none the wiser. So it's hilarious once you know, because yeah, she's literally right there in the midst, trying to get an interview with Malady, even though she is Malady.
Yeah, and it's crazy that she can blend in so well. You would never guess she can turn off that flamboyance.
So Augie regales Lavinia with the story about ice skating with Hugo as kids, and we learn that Lavinia wasn't always chair-ridden. Augustus and Lavinia meet for tea. Lavinia's clearly on edge and suffering side effects, headaches, courtesy of the Galanthu. So that gives us a reason, you know, we know that, because I know underground she's a bit on edge, but she's like it still. So yeah, is it messing with her mind? It's at least giving her headaches, but is it also messing with her, you know, her personality and putting her on edge? She warns Augustus to steer clear of Swan, especially now that his club has become a matter of public record, which is humorous for us because we know that he has put his name on this club. She also advises him to stay out of the city during the hanging. He lies and tells her that he'll be in Brighton. Also at the end you see the drawings on the table, and one of them is penance, and she clearly sees that. I find it interesting that she doesn't scold him about it. It's almost like she's letting him have some freedom, which is nice to see.
Well, I think she kind of pre-scolded him about it, because I think this is my favorite scene in the show.
Okay.
Follow my logic here. I could be totally wrong. But she mentions to Augustus that he trusts too easily, right?
Yep.
And then when Augustus kind of earns her ire by apologizing to the cafe guy, she mentions there are vultures everywhere. So we know Augustus's affinity for vultures from the pilot episode. So I think when Lavinia refers to vultures, she's potentially referring to Augustus. Because as we know, Augustus lies to her about going to Brighton in that scene. And when Lavinia sees that drawn picture of penance, I think she knows that he's lying. So she was low-key expressing that she can't even trust him anymore. And right. There was almost a resigned attitude to it. My little brother, I've lost trust there too. She's clearly a very distrustful person. And I think the fact that she used to skate, right, that was part of that conversation. Maybe whatever it is that handicapped her from being able to skate might be at the root of her distrust of people. Something traumatic must have happened to her.
For me, this was kind of a scene for me to see a little bit of her human side, where she's for once not lecturing him and not doing something downright, you know, awful. And they're having a little bit of a reminiscence about their kind of normal life, nothing to do with the touch at all. And then just, you know, ask for something nice from Brighton. I don't know. For me, that's what I got from the scene, was just, oh, nice, they're family, and maybe she's just not going to be as mean to him anymore. But yeah, I see. I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah, I
think she is going to be mean to him. I think there's a rift develop between them. But we'll see.
We'll see. So next we see Mundy and Swan facing off again. The Ferryman's Club is facing pushback as the tides turn against the Touch. Lord Humphreys pressed charges against Swan, which leads Mundy to warn Swan to keep his people at the club safe. Swan asks Mundy why he took a job that he clearly hates, and Effie is there again and asks Swan for a favour, whispers in his ear at the end, which is now leading me to wonder what that favour was, which I'll speak about later on once we get to the end scene. But yeah, this was, again, very character-focused, this, with their more vulnerable sides of their relationships, I think, this episode.
Hugo defends the Touched for his own kind of self-interests, but once again, you're right. We're seeing that same side to Mundy, where a lot of his hatred towards Hugo is, I think, externally directed self-hatred. I am surprised at how such a righteous cop who kind of holds the wealthy accountable is allowed to keep his job in such a corrupt society. I would imagine a guy like Hugo or any of the, aristocrats would just throw a couple of dollars in the police department's pocket to hire a new detective.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny that they don't have their own man, like someone that's tight in with them at the head of the police when they're trying to get away with all this stuff in the background.
We see in a fleeting glance, we see that Penance has scars on her back. We see it when she's bathing or something like that. I think maybe that's why her name is Penance. Maybe it's like a self-flagellating thing that like the albino guy from the Da Vinci Code was doing.
Right, yeah.
But I don't know. That's something to be seen. And then we see Augustus visit, and he's going to be using birds as a distraction from the drilling.
Yeah, I liked this scene. Again, we're seeing everyone's kind of more vulnerable side. She's bathing. I personally didn't notice any scars. We looked up online to see like some people's theories and stuff. And yeah, some people have written, like you said, kind of the religious side. Other people were just like, oh, maybe it's just from wearing a corset or whatever. I couldn't pick up on anything myself. But I like how, she sees this bird and her first thought is, well, it must be Augie, and it's just perfect timing, She says, Augie. He's like, hi. Oh, God, no. No, I'm definitely not spying on you whilst you're bathing.
I like that 2/3 of their interactions have been Penance accusing Augustus of either murder or voyeurism.
Yeah, and he's like, oh my God, I hope you're not recording me again, are you? I love when Amalia walks in, am I interrupting? And he's like, yes, please. Because they're having such an awkward interaction. He's like, thankful to be saved.
You know what I noticed? I noticed shades of Simon and Kaylee from Firefly. Actually, it's exactly that. Because Penance and Kaylee are both like these golly gee whiz technology ladies. And Augustus and Simon are both kind of awkward, nerdy guys from a wealthy background who are defined by their relationships to their sisters, Lavinia and River. It's like they're Whedon is kind of recycling these archetypes and adding different, like slightly changing the dynamics.
Yeah, they are the cute, innocent ones that you really hope will make it in the end. I like how when they get to talking about the mission with the drilling, first of all, the drill breaking, because again, like the kind of fire extinguisher she builds, not everything's perfect, which is funny. I also like that they're looking for answers. Amalia says, is it safe? Who's down there with it? The gallant. Yeah, hope. The main thing they want to be looking for is hope. So yeah, I like how, she's thinking that there might be people down there with it, which is interesting because there are.
Yeah, there are. And we might see that in the next episode.
I'm really hoping that we see that half of the mission, that it will just play back to that.
So next we see Lord Masson visit the Beggar King. Masson, so it turns out that it wasn't the Beggar King, it was Lord Masson who set odium on Amalia's path to go fight her and kill her. And then Masson wants the Beggar King to stir up some chaos. I was going to say we see Masson and the Beggar King are very similar. They're opposite ends of the same coin. It just seems that Masson is fighting the change, whereas the Beggar King is embracing and adapting to the change.
Yeah, definitely. Because like he says, he's come from nothing. When you've got nothing, I guess you've just got to roll with the tide. You've not got the power to inflict the change. I liked, there's a few things here that I liked. Masson says that a thing that threatens the natural order is monstrous, even if it's pretty. So again, just reiterating his fear of change and, talking about Penance and the car that she's made, that she, an uneducated Irish woman, shouldn't be conceiving such things. But, I mean, she's clearly educated. She's a smart cookie. I don't think her turn has given her smarts as such. It's given her this ability to see energy, but I think she's always been very smart, which is why that power's probably gone to her.
That's why she was literally empowered.
Yes. Also, Masson says that these people are rewriting the laws of reality. And later on in the episode, Amalia says that the fate of the world as we know it hangs in the balance when she's arguing with Penance. And both of them, for me, are talking like they know the future. She knows that what they're doing is going to directly affect not just the future, but that specific future.
I think you totally have your thumb on the pulse there. Only I would say that while Amalia is a futurist and has her mind on the future, I think Masson more so has his mind in the past. That's what I would say. Because he doesn't want... I mean, sure, if you have your mind on the past, then you also have your mind on a future. They go hand in hand. But I think he doesn't... He wants the future to be the past. He wants them to be the same thing.
Yeah, scared of change.
Right.
And then, inciting the Beggar King to stir up some chaos. Just adding fuel to the fire. He wants the biggest, outrageous mess as possible to make the touch look as bad as possible.
And he's doing it independently from the rest of those Parliament guys. Penance... kind of lamenting losing Lucy in her conversation with Amalia. I think that's kind of the extension of her wrestling with her ideals versus the reality of what's happening, and the gulf between them widening and widening. And she thinks I don't want to use the word naively, but maybe I'll keep using the word idealistically. She thinks that Amalia would never kill Lucy, but the reality is that Amalia did want to kill Lucy. That's the reality. Mm-hmm. And that's a conflict between what she wants to be true and what really is true. There's a lot of that conflict for her.
Amalia talks about how Myrtle speaks Galanthi, which is useful, and I don't want to say she's a bit heartless, but I feel like it's kind of like, she wants to help Myrtle, but only because she can speak Galanthi and it will be helpful. Almost like she's not as attached to these people as the rest of the orphans are. And then obviously we see all of the nooses hanging outside, and that is, the turning point for Penance, isn't it?
That's the thing. It's like, I think Penance thinks that letting people kill Malady is a slippery slope. Mm-hmm. It's a noose that will lead to a row of nooses. That's the danger that we see visually represented when, I guess, the purists knock at their door and actually hang those nooses.
Yeah.
It's a pretty violent, scary image. And in her, wrestling with those ideals where she doesn't want to create these machines of violence and destruction.
Yep.
And even the power that she's been given, it has a destruction and a violence to it that she's kind of having to confront. And ideally, ideally you want to just create a cute little motor car, but sometimes reality necessitates violence, or at least that's the argument that's being made, I think. Yeah,
also just the thing that the world as it is, people use things that weren't necessarily meant for war and stuff. They use them badly. So even if she has the best intention with her inventions, once you invent something and you put it out there, it becomes the world's, right? So it's anyone's to use as they wish, and that's a scary thought.
Yeah, and that was like the great regret of Project Manhattan, the guys who made the nuclear bomb.
Yeah. I
am become death, the destroyer of worlds. We do see Penance conceiving a way to break Malady out of jail, and Amalia resists, but eventually she gives in, and the team picks who they want to follow. So Horatio, Annie, Augustus, and Su Ping Lim, who later joins Penance, initially go with Amalia. And Harriet, Desiree, Nimble, and George join Penance. What are your thoughts on those alliances?
Okay, so first of all, I love this whole thing. I mentioned at the beginning that it's nice to see them separate and have their own entirely different opinions, but still totally remain friends, because this could have been a turning point. I read the synopsis for this episode and I was really worried that they were just going to completely start hating each other or something. But so it's really nice to see them, like how this whole thing was handled. Because it's possible to have completely different opinions and be best friends. So that's nice to see. So just touching on what they say inside before the picking of the teams as such. She says about the future of the world depends on the present. Isn't that why you're here? She also mentions... She talks about Sarah, or Malady. What did she do? Because she says, what I did to Sarah. And it's again one of those things where I feel like she's talked to at least Penance about this. We don't know, but they know what she did. Because all we know as such is that she left her. Yeah, so I want to know more about that. But yeah, the teams, this was really great. So the whole thing was hilarious. She's saying, don't do what Penance doing. She doesn't offer anything other than, don't do that. That's mental. And that was great. Penance is like, I rehearsed this and I am sweaty.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant. The most intriguing pick for me is when Augie, is hiding first of all. And then when it comes to it, he goes to Amalia's side, which must feel like the greatest betrayal ever for him to be doing, if that's how he feels, and also from Penance's angle. But for me, it's it's the next step, because when we see Augie there at the orphanage already, we know he's rebelling, we know he's taking his life in his own hands. But this for me is him also, that's a hard decision. There's this woman that he's very clearly interested in, and most people would just take their side. But he goes with Amalia, so that's showing, him really coming into his own.
Yeah, I guess he is kind of coming into his own, because I guess Amalia would need him more than Penance would. When I saw that at first, I thought he was qualifying his rebellion. There was a hint of cowardice still showing in his behavior. Like,
yep.
If he really was in charge of his faculties, he would walk over to Penance's side, but I get what you're saying.
I also liked the quick little Nimble just following Bonfire. And then she's like, I'll pay you. Yeah, sure thing, I'm here. So next, the city readies for the hanging, and Effie publishes a fake piece on Malady. Now, when I first saw it, I didn't it doesn't give you a lot of chance to really read what's on the paper. And he just very quickly says it's a fiction. So I didn't really focus on it. But afterwards, when I rewatched it, I really wanted to focus on that. And yeah, you see that it's, a piece from Malady's point of view, and he calls it a fiction because he knows that he did not let Effie interview Malady. But now, from the reveal, we know that it's real because she is Malady. So it is a piece written from her point of view that's been put out there for the world to read. It does at this scene, the starting of it, when we see her walking out, it doesn't show us a lot of close-ups. It's obviously trying to hide the fact and not show too much that it's not Malady. Because it's strange, if it was her, you think that if this was her last moment on the show, it would be showing her heavily. This is her last moment possibly, or she's about to be rescued. You think it would be really focusing in on her. And then we also hear the rumbling from underground, which we know would be the Galanthe and possibly the other team causing a ruckus underground, but we have no idea what they're actually doing.
Yeah, I actually didn't notice the fake piece on Malady, but you're right, it is the real piece on Malady, essentially. And I wonder if that will be the death of Malady as a public figure. Maybe once she takes that wig off, she becomes someone else entirely. It goes back to Sarah, maybe?
Possibly, yeah.
That would be a good way to avoid... Unless, I guess the detective figures out at the end that that wasn't actually Malady, so he could very well expose her. But as far as anybody else knows, Malady is gone.
Yeah, and if she does kind of lay low and not be this radicalised person anymore, would Mundy want to let that out into the world? That the police let her slip through their fingers and messed up that royally bad. That's not very good coverage.
Right, and Penance even remarks very explicitly to Amalia that, don't you think it's worth exploring the possibility that Malady can be healed? And Amalia just kind of discounts it, but it's kind of like put into the audience's imagination that maybe she can be healed. And I was drawing the correlation that if Malady can be healed, then maybe all those lobotomies can be healed.
Yeah, definite possibility. So we see Malady hang herself, or as we know, it's Malady's henchman. And then her other henchman, the guy that control minds, he electrocutes everybody. So we have the whole, Mundy spots Penance and this instant look of, oh God, something's going down here, right? Something's not right. And I thought that was... He instantly says, she's going to kill us. He knows something's off. She's going to kill us all. Everyone that's here, everyone that's come to watch her die. They think they're all there to see this spectacle, when in fact they're all there to be part of her spectacle. Which is, crazy turned on its head. One of the big things, so going back to Hugo, he's there. Now, when you were speaking to Mundy earlier on, he seemed like he wasn't interested in going to this hanging. He hires the Touched. Why does he want to go see one of them be hanged? He doesn't seem interested in it at all. She asks him for a favour, and then we see him there. He comes in with all the higher-up guys, but then he jumps down with everybody else to mix among everyone. We don't see him, as far as I was aware, at all throughout the watching of Malady being brought out and everybody there. It kind of pushes around, focuses on everybody, but we don't see where he went. And then he pops back up at the end, to scurry back up, and Masson pulls him up. It's kind of like, so now I'm just screaming, what was he doing? Why did we not see him? We saw everyone's reactions, we saw everyone there, and all the bystanders, but we didn't see what he was doing at all. What was that favour? So you've got the Beggar King lighting bonfires around to stir more trouble in an attempt to convince the Londoners that Masson's extraordinary messages are necessary. And that's just, it's like everybody's just playing off of everybody. Everybody wants to, incite all of this fear and these riots and everything. But in all of it, the most interesting thing we see is after Harriet is on the floor being trodden on. So Sean said to me, I can't believe that she turns the door to glass, letting everyone escape, and they all tread on her. And I was like, No, I 100% believe that is what would happen in real life, because people are panicked and that is what they do. People literally in real life, in situations like that, trample on each other and kill each other. It would happen. It does happen. So to see that Malady is the only person, and she's really putting herself out there, because if something happened, or, you know, her face got nicked or her prosthetic or her wig fell off, she could be totally letting the touch to her after essentially see her. She saves Harriet, and afterwards she's given this real look of like, I don't know if it's a what did I just do look, or a, yeah, should I have done that, or I'm kind of glad that I helped them, because I think maybe she didn't want the touch to get caught up in this. This is to show how monstrous the regular folk can be. This is to show how she's the monster who's meant to be on show and meant to be killed, and what she's done is made all of the regular people look like monsters. I don't think her aim was anything other than that, really.
Yeah. And the regular people who came to see her executed, they were her targets. And I think she noticed that the Touched were trying to rescue her. That might have played into it. And I just want to harken back to the metaphor idea of just the image of her being trampled by all those people was so affecting for me. I thought that I would think that would be affecting for her too, to be trampled on by a society that just doesn't care about anyone other than, you know, its own interests.
So then we see Malady's, or who we think is Malady's, body being removed, and her shoe falls off. We instantly know who it is because we've seen her henchman in the previous episode with her toes cut off. So we know that it wasn't Malady who was hanged, it was actually a devotee. And then it shows us through several flashbacks throughout the episode, leading up to the execution, including the moment that we haven't seen before, which is the actual body swap where she runs past the wall, her double jumps in, and that's... So it wasn't Malady who got her head smashed against the wall. It was her henchman, which is crazy because he really, really hit her hard. So it's Boyle who is the woman, in fact, who turned up dead in the underground tunnels. And Effie sheds her prosthetics and her wig to reveal that she is in fact Malady and that she's been posing as Effie Boyle very, very well. You know, like you say, for someone so maniacal to be able to be so normal, is the rest of her, is she in control of this act that she's putting on? Because it's almost for us that it should be uncontrollable. That is how she is. So to see that she's able to just turn a switch and be this other person is kind of crazy for us. I've got another point that I picked up on the newspaper where it says, when it flashed back, it says, "You will be shocked." And that's like, oh, literally, because they were all shocked, literally electrocuted. Yeah, I was like, brilliant. And I love Malady at the end. She just wanders off, she gives a little bit of a laugh, and she just does the la, which I think she's done randomly in possibly the first episode. Yeah, she's just fantastic.
Just the joy of the chaos is palpable. I did want to mention one thing about Harriet, the character Harriet Core. I had this moment of idiotic revelation about her power, because we see, so her entire conceit and her mind space is essentially that she wants to be she wants to be a lawyer, she's studying law, she wants to be part of justice, something that's not generally afforded to brown women, particularly in that time period. And, she's a good student, and she's perhaps a better student than her fiancé. And as a result, she's encountering some relationship issues. She's got strong ideals when it comes to justice. So, and then I noticed, like, for the last 3 episodes, we've seen her power is to turn things into glass, right? And in the last couple episodes, we see her several times shattering things that are glass. So when she turned that door to glass, I had the realization that, oh, her power is a manifestation of the idea of her shattering the glass ceiling.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right, which for the listeners who might not know, to shatter the glass ceiling is just a term used for the social construct of this ceiling that women have, well, I guess historically shattered when they were part of the suffragette movement and getting the right to vote and getting the right to own land and, you know, all that type of stuff and the wage gap and all that sort of stuff. I just wanted to mention that point that I didn't realize.
So, some letters from listeners. If you have a comment, theory, or question for us, please tweet it to us at theneverspodcast without an A, or send us an email at theneverspodcast@gmail.com, and we'll read it on an upcoming episode. So, a follow-up letter from Berger in the response to our response to his last letter. I need to clear up a misunderstanding about my last letter. I do not disagree about the Nazi imagery or that Lavinia is a black hat. It just took me until the end of the episode to realise the latter. The point I was making was a little confused and my letter was read right after a very critical one. I actually picked up on the Nazi imagery myself, though the Chosen by God parallel passed me by, and I thought that was a really clever observation. We've had loads of Nazi imagery in the Whedonverse before. You know, it's Nazi Germany and I have Playboys in my locker. And it's certainly not our fault for seeing what is clearly there. While many conflicting interpretations of a show may be valid, I don't think art is quite like a Rorschach blot. Instead of trying to reiterate the muddled point from my last letter, I'd like to pose you a question. If you grant the touched need a patron to protect them from the authorities, who should they turn to? Lavinia is clearly a black hat. Augie is nicer, but he's an idiot. He doesn't have his sister's connections and he has put his name to Hugo's Ferryman Club. There's no way he is going to be able to stand up to someone like Masson. Hugo may be an alternative. He doesn't let people bully him and he's quite good at bullying people himself. The problem is that he is trying to turn all the touch into sex workers and I don't get the impression that he's nice about it. The way I see it, Amalia has a problem. Because she can't keep the police and the mob at bay with Fisdiscus at once. She needs friends in high places, and all the current candidates suck. They make me miss the Watchers' Council. Thank you, Berger. So the main question there is, who should they turn to?
This is a really good question. I think this really gets to the heart of everything we're questioning. So I would say, referring back to the chosen people motif, the chosen by God, I think it could very well be a Moses situation, like where Amalia has to be the Moses figure and deliver her people from the clutches of Lavinia and Masson herself. And just like Moses's advantage was that he had God's support, so like when the Pharaoh refused, God just hit all the Egyptians with a plague. I think maybe Amalia's ace in her pocket is the Galanthy, which is already giving all the evil people headaches. And, you know, that like there's no Advil in 1896, so that could be a compelling reason to give in. But I think ultimately it has to be Augustus, even though he's a bit lacking in courage right now. He's the lion from Wizard of Oz. But that's the journey of any character. It involves transformation and change and coming into some kind of power that they didn't previously have, that they then can use for the good of the people around them. So I think I at least if I'm having to project, it seems to me that Augustus is positioned to make that journey and to be of use to the touched in a way that Lavinia, his sister, is clearly not.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I have this kind of burning worry that Amalia might not make it as far as we'd hope in terms of like the show in general. I feel like it would be kind of interesting that if the character who can see into the future gets tripped up somehow, because you'd think that, I don't know, she wouldn't meet an untimely death because she'd be able to avoid it, although she's already said that she can't avoid what she sees. So I don't know. If something happens crazy with her and Malady, I feel like it will be Penance that steps into the leading shoes, and it would be Penance and Augustus.
Yeah, Penance has already demonstrated her leadership, but I mean, Amalia has, like, died almost 7 times now. Yeah, it could happen. I mean, the show is not called Amalia, you know, just like Buffy was called Buffy.
And
even
Buffy still died.
Yeah. So we have an email from Ebony Smith. So far as we have seen Amalia get hurt or injured, and we've seen an unsteady side to Amalia's reaction with Mary's death, do you think at any point in the show Penance might get hurt? And if so, how do you think Amalia would react?
I think this is interesting because in this episode, when Penance is saying that she has this plan of her own to save Malady, she says that that's great, but once you've been shot 7 times and so on and so forth, she's basically saying that she thinks that this plan's going to get Penance killed, and all she can say to her is be careful. So even though she
does send the lady with the very strong arms to go.
That's true, yeah. She obviously cares about her a lot, but at the same time I think she's wise enough to give her the freedom that she needs. If she was a controlling character, Penance wouldn't care for her, because Penance looks after her just as much as she looks after Penance, right? So they have this really nice dynamic. I think that if she were to get really hurt, only right in front of her, then Amalia would definitely go crazy, and definitely kill whoever's just hurt Penance. Also, possibly fall apart afterwards. I think we would definitely see that kind of aftermath. You know, with Mary's death, she goes a little bit off the rails, and that's someone that she didn't know. So if she was to see Penance get hurt or even die, I think it would definitely have major reactions, yeah.
Yeah, what's that word for when the letters are rearranged in a word, it makes another word? I forget the term for that.
An anagram?
Exactly, an anagram. Amalia, I haven't actually counted the letters, but Amalia feels emotionally like an anagram of Malady. So maybe she'll go Malady if Penance gets hurt. But she does refer to Penance as a soldier in, I think, like the 2nd or 3rd episode, and she seems to be very emotionally closed off. But I do think you're right. There's some genuine love there, mm-hmm. and I think she would react atypically. You know, there could be tears, and I think that if there was someone to hurt Penance, it would be Lavinia, because Augustus didn't heed her warning. I think Lavinia would be the one to kind of godfather Penance.
Okay, so next we have another submission from Scarlett, so let's give a listen.
Hi, this is Scarlett Walker again from Birmingham, Alabama. I have 2 more theories. One is regarding the calling card with the swan on it that was given to the members of the Pink Rags. I think that card was given to them by Alistair Swan, or someone who works for Alistair Swan, Hugo's father, because we've heard about this man. We know he's alive. All we know is that he went crazy. And they describe the person who gave them the card as posh but not too uppity. So to me, it works out. And then the other theory is that because Masson describes himself as the Lion, Great Britain, I'm wondering if when his daughter was touched, she somehow turned into this like lioness beast kind of creature with her turn because of him. Okay. Bye.
Yeah, wow, okay. So, you know what? We know that the card wasn't Hugo Swan's, but not really given much thought into who it was. But I would assume that it would just be Masson making trouble.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the connection would be between Hugo's dad and Mary's funeral and the Purists, but clearly someone was trying to provoke the detective because of his hatred of Hugo, and by framing Hugo. Right now we don't really know anything about the dad, but now we do know that Masson orchestrated the assassination. So to me, it would make sense that he would also frame Hugo, especially after we saw their heated conversation where Lord Masson goes, "You should have drowned," that conversation. I think he totally could be the one behind the card. And then as far as Masson's daughter theory, I totally believe it. I don't think she's dead. I think she's just dead to Masson.
Yeah.
I think low-key Masson's accusations against the electricity guy's daughter are a very clear indication of his potentially messed up relationship with his own daughter.
Yeah, I mean, we did say before that we think that she's possibly some kind of monster. Yeah, I didn't think about lion, but it would be definitely interesting for something that he holds with such pride, you know. Also something that he would hunt to hang on his wall, supposedly. It would, you know, if his daughter turns into something like that, that's a very interesting situation for sure. So yeah, thanks Scarlett, and if any of you would like to send us an audio submission, just record yourself and send a recording to theneverspodcast@gmail.com and we'll play it on the show. So Crazy Chris B on Twitter says, in a Whedon show, we're used to people dying on us, but did you guys think we'd lose two characters that we thought were going to be a big deal so early in the game, particularly that heartbreaking one?
Yeah, I don't think we lost Lucy. Unless the show gets cancelled, I think she'll probably be back. And losing Mary was a bit of a gut punch, but I understand, because you can't really have a character with that magical of a power without running into some story issues, so I kind of get that. But my thing is, like, there's so many characters now in this show, and I kind of love all of them, so hopefully their sheer quantity doesn't make any of them expendable.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because I think I mentioned this before on one of the other episodes that I don't find a show interesting if you never think any of the main characters are at risk. There are a lot of shows like it where they never kill off any of their main characters because, you know, they know from with social media being such a huge thing, the productions know what characters are super popular and what characters are essentially making them money, which then leads the studios to not get rid of those people. Even if the writers want it, they'll be like, you can't get rid of that character, they're making us too much money, which can really cause a show to go downhill. Because for me, if the main character is invincible, then every fight scene I see and every action, everything that's happening, you know that nothing's going to happen to them. So as much as I do love all of these characters, if they're all invincible, is there almost a point in watching it? Because if it was real life, you know, would a group of people this large get through life without casualties?
Yeah. I think that that invincibility works for more episodic shows like Family Guy and Simpsons and things like that, where there's not really much change happening. The characters kind of stay the same every episode, and it's all self-contained. But with a serial show like this one, where characters are changing and evolving, you can't really have death not be a part of that, because death is the ultimate change. And without that, it kind of invalidates life. You can't really see that. So yeah, I think you're right. I agree with you on that.
So yeah, I wasn't necessarily shocked to lose a character very early on. And I think, at least on the lead up to the end of the park scene, it was a little bit of a shock, but also I didn't feel a huge loss, if you know what I mean. It was obviously sad and heartbreaking. I don't know, it was necessary for the show to move forward. So Lucy, I did find, I wasn't expecting it, and I found that a bit harder because it was a character that almost, it's like, here's a character that's really great and looks out for everybody. But when you rewatch it, you see that she makes too big a deal and she's the one that gets most upset at everything, and you're just like, oh, no, you learn to not like her as much, so you don't mind when she leaves.
Alright, so next we've got an email from Bailey Gross. She says, True said, when I'm from, I'm so glad you caught that. Good catch, Laura. It completely changes the meaning, although it makes me wonder about True saying in an earlier episode that she woke up knowing things she shouldn't. Makes me curious how those two statements will line up. I thought when she first said that she meant she also remembered the ship, but now it seems like maybe she meant she knows the future and why the ship was sent through time. But also Penance says, I know your burden's true. And then at the end, she's the one that confirms to Harriet that it is a message from someone else. So it seems she knows a lot more than anyone else about what's going on as well. Do you think True actually confided in her completely? Bailey. Thank you, Bailey.
Yeah. I would hope to think that True told her everything. Because they have this, I feel like they have this real level of trust with each other. And for Amalia to get the most out of Penance, she knows that she needs to have Penance fully on board and trusting her. So I think that she did confide in her completely. And I do think that True doesn't know her own story fully. Because she is confusing. She says things like, you know, she knows about this future, where when I'm from this and that, and if she is from the future or wherever she's from, and then the next minute she's saying she doesn't know why she was sent here. She woke up, you know, knowing things she shouldn't know. I think she is definitely confused, and maybe as the Galactus, starts to crack, maybe her and Malady were both awakened to new insights of their possible previous lives or whatever's going on there.
Maybe traveling back in time wipes your memory.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, she's just got a gut feeling that I'm from the future, but she doesn't remember why. Could be a Terminator thing, like she's Kyle Reese from the future, sent to the past to save whatever happens from happening.
Yeah, and also, so far we've only seen her have glimpses of the near future and then directly follow up with those glimpses. But we don't know if she also has glimpses of the far future. We haven't seen that yet, but it's possible that she sees all kinds of stuff. So it might not even be that she's from the future, but that she's had a lot of glimpses of little things from the future, and that's why she's so confused about it. And I'm only just thinking about that right now. Yeah, that could be a definite possibility.
Yeah, all the characters do know way more than we do as an audience. And
for sure, yeah.
Penance definitely knows the most about Amalia, which is interesting because Penance is kind of like the most truthful, honest, transparent character in the show, and then her polar opposite would be Amalia, who's the most guarded, closed off, emotionally distant character in the show. So maybe it's a yin-yang thing of opposites complementing each other, but I like their friendship, and I have no theories.
So next, in an email from Paul Grizzard, love the podcast and your insightful and measured takes on this great show from HBO. A few thoughts on your most recent episode. I agree with you that it seems that the characters at the orphanage seem to know more about Amalia than we do. When Lucy goes into detail about the death of her child and how her turn is a curse, she accusingly asks Amalia, "Was it you?" when discussing how she got touched. This leads me to believe that she knows more about Amalia's backstory than the audience, and makes me wonder who else knows. Also, I'd like to put in my agreement to the theory that Amalia is from the future. If the touch seemed to receive turns that somehow relate to and or enhance a pre-existing trait, then Amalia's ability to get glimpses of the future would certainly reflect the fact that she is from another time. Just my thoughts. Keep up the great work, Paul Grizzard. Yeah, I think that's kind of following on from the last one. That's another interesting thing. Yeah, maybe because if she is from the future, when she was given it, she might not have had, I know, it could be a possibility that she had her turn already if she's one of these people from the future. But if not, if she's from the future and she receives a turn like everybody else, it would make sense that she gets that ability.
Maybe she is from the future, and but her turn was something new to her. Like when she says, I woke up knowing things that I shouldn't know. It could be that even though she is from the future and she knows a whole lot, she didn't have the ability to look into the future. And so those ripplings that she's seeing in her mind, that's what drove her to the asylum. Like, why am I seeing into the future? Maybe it's something like that. But because Amalia does respond to Lucy that they messed up. It wasn't supposed to happen that way.
Yeah.
When Lucy accusingly asks her, was it you? So I don't think Amalia is mind wiped. I think she has a lot of information. The new thing is probably just the looking into the future. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, and in terms of who knows more about her backstory, I think that Penance definitely knows the most, just because I think Amalia trusts her the most. I think she did confide a lot in Lucy because, as she mentioned, she was the first adult. She was the first person that she felt she didn't have to look after, so she could probably confide in her a lot more about her own insecurities and, issues with her past. But yeah, it seems like now everybody knows at least the bullet points of Amalia's past and the Galanthe. So yeah, we are the ones to learn.
So now we have from Tharias Unlimited on Twitter. He tweeted to us and he said, I'm calling it. Lavinia's the one who had Mary killed. It had to be someone with enough influence to get Gatling gun arm guy released from jail. And Masson is too obvious. I thought the same thing, man. You can join my fan club. We meet up and we're incorrect about things. Right now it's just me, a couple weathermen, and all the people who thought the world was ending in 2012. You're welcome to join. Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, I was with you. I thought that it was probably Lavinia. But yeah, no, it's 100% Masson now, and we know that. And so Cloister Hearted on YouTube says, I kind of got the sense that Masson knows a bit more about True and her situation than we as the audience do at present. Something about his wording in that conversation, how he pointedly referenced the women who should have known unless she did. And the further insinuation that the enemy was Britain itself. The whole episode was loaded with symbolism of the British Empire, Malady wearing a cropped red coat in the scene at the police station, the reference to the lion, which I'm trying not to jump to connect to the Masson's touched daughter, literal enemy in his basement. And then we find out that the thing speaking to True is living in the heart of the nation, which Masson seems to know about or at least sense. Also, I know everyone has high hopes for Augie, but I find him kind of sus. As Hugo's best friend and now having access to the ferryman, Augie could easily have got hold of Hugo's stationery to send that note. Part of me feels like we were shown the Lavinia connection way too early, but that perhaps this was done intentionally so that she could be used as a decoy to get us to suspect her when really Augie is the one with some deeper agenda. I have yet to back up any of these means without motive, but there may be something in Augie's comment about the barbaric nature of his kind.
Yeah, Augie does keep getting accused by Penance of all the crimes. Murder, voyeur. I haven't seen any indication that he secretly hates Hugo, though, and would frame him. I think Hugo is one of his only friends, so if he was to have beef with anyone, it's probably his sister, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think if it turned out that through all of this, Augie is some real dark kind of guy with a bit of evil to him, it would be a real kind of like Usual Suspects thing, wouldn't it? He'd be playing that part so well of the awkward, shy guy that, seemingly can't do anything or be in control of anything, and then it turns out that he's been working the strings behind the whole time. That would definitely be,
now that I think of it, it would be interesting, that conversation he had with Lavinia, where she kind of says, there's vultures everywhere, dressed up in hats and silk, or whatever she was saying. If he is in fact the evil one, he's the vulture that nobody knows about, and he's dressed up in his coat, that came from Hugo, I guess. Yeah, that would be interesting, but I don't foresee that happening. But then again, I don't know.
Yeah, we've not
but well
foreseen.
spotted with the symbolism. That's interesting. So we have an email from Steve. I don't know if this was mentioned. The death year of the girl's mother was the same as the girl's birth. I think this means that Masson's wife died in childbirth. That would explain why he is so against the touched, especially if the incident turned his daughter into a monster or killed her. Yup.
Yeah, I did pick up on that when it went past the headstones and made the same conclusion that she must have died at childbirth. So that's already a reason for him to just kind of, hate the world. Also, his maid or, mistress of the house is wanting him to get a mistress, and he's really against it. And you can really understand why, if his previous wife died at childbirth and he's then bringing up his daughter, why he wouldn't have wanted to bring another lady into the house, possibly. And then, he would definitely be against the touch. I think the whole thing with him is he's so set in his ways. And he did seem to be happier in that little glimpse we saw of him with his daughter. But if the touched, essentially, not through any fault of their own, but whatever caused the touch, killed his daughter or turned her into a monster, he's definitely got a real valid reason to hate them.
Yeah, that must be why he's looking for a cure.
Yeah, again, it seems like both evil parties are deep down looking for a cure, which is in essence possibly good.
Do we know if Lavinia's looking for a cure? Because I know some people think she is, but it's never mentioned explicitly. Maybe a cure for herself? Maybe a cure for her own handicap?
It would be, because we're not sure how she lost the use of her legs, but we know that she did have the use at one point because we mentioned the ice skating. She thinks that maybe she should have been one of the touched, and that's why she's doing this. If only she had gained some ability, even if it was the ability to walk again. And she feels maybe kind of scorned that she wasn't one of these chosen few that got something. So our last letter is from Carol, who wrote us an email. I wanted to comment on how detailed and informative your podcast is compared to the other podcast with the Giggly Girls. So thank you, Carol. I haven't heard your commentary on the 4th episode, but did anyone catch in episode 3 where Lord Messon is leaving his estate and passes the grave of his wife and daughter? Notice the dates of death and birth. It seems the wife died giving birth to his daughter, and the daughter's death was listed on the day of the incident. Did anyone notice the man installing the phone system at Messon's estate discovers the basement and sees and hears noise and movement coming from behind a door? The housemaid appears behind him and says the dogs have gone rabid and hurries him past the door. Are we sure Lord Masson's daughter is dead? Love your theories and details. Yeah, I think we've covered that. So I'm almost 100% certain that, that's his daughter in the dungeon.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm positively convinced that she's not dead. She's in there.
It'll be really interesting if at some point she escapes and she kills him. And he meets his own end with by his daughter's hand, and then she can go off and live at the orphanage with everybody else happily. Like, to be imprisoned by your own father is would definitely make you angry. So thanks again for all of your letters. It's great hearing from you all. Please keep them coming. If we didn't read your letter in this episode, we'll be sure to get it on our next one.
Cool. So some final thoughts. I thought this was a very sexy episode. I give it a sexy 9 out of 10. It was it was my favorite one yet. With the exception of the very first episode, I think this one's my favorite. I enjoyed the characters, the story. I enjoyed the twist. Twists usually don't. I usually don't love twists as much as just like plot devices as, oh look, it was a dream the whole time, or some Jacob's Ladder shit. But I this one felt fun and crazy, and oh man, the double thing, it was very Shakespearean in that kind of way. It was, I really loved this episode. It was fun, and is Mary going to stay dead? Yeah, I think she is going to stay dead. What am I hoping to see in the ensuing episodes? I think in the next episode, we're gonna see the second half of the quest that Amalia did with her group. It feels almost like a Mission Impossible thing, where they're gathering their crew and they're going on their thing, and the puzzle pieces will all come together after the next episode. So I'm excited to see more about the Galanthe, and I'm excited to use the word Galanthe in my normal conversation. And what are your thoughts?
Same as you, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was fantastic. There was so much going on. I watched it a second time and enjoyed it just as much. I'm looking forward to seeing the 6th episode and then going back and watching 1 to 6 back to back. I think that as almost like a mini, well, not a mini, an extended movie will be very, very enjoyable experience. I like how you're at a bit of a loss at this episode because everybody is really, knows what's happening and we don't, and it's a good pace again. I liked, same as you, the reveal of the twist. I mean, like I say, I noticed that it was Malady for sure, but I was still questioning whether it was just a straight swap because there's so many things that it could be. Maybe Malady is like a split personality and that what we were seeing was Sarah and that's Malady in the cell and she'd split into 2 people somehow. I don't know. All these things go through your head because this show is so unpredictable. I liked... so when it ended, my first thought was, next episode, hopefully we're going to see what the other team got up to. And it will go back to them going on their mission and we'll see what happened. I'm assuming there was a huge explosion underground. We saw the ground shaking and Bonfire Annie looks like she's been burnt quite badly. Augie's been hit on the head and injured. Everyone was injured and we need to see how that all happened. So I'm super excited for the next episode, and I mean I'm sure it's going to end just as cliffhangery and really keep us on our toes for the next half of the season. I don't know. I don't think we're going to get too many answers, but at the same time they are going to directly investigate the Galanthe, so all manner of things could happen. Like you said, they could uprise and all of the other touched pitch in and help them do whatever's going to happen. We will see. It's going to be exciting. Yeah, it's funny about Mary. They talked about her a lot, and it was almost like they was talking about her. She's not coming back. But I don't know. She has some kind of connection with the Galanthe, sharing the voice, and maybe, I don't know, she was like an astral projection of whatever the Galanthe is. I don't know. I'm just getting thinking here. But I really enjoyed this episode and I'm very much looking forward to the next one. So, that's it for this episode of the podcast. And if you enjoy the Nevers podcast, we would, of course, like it if you left us a positive review. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Amazon Music Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever else you stream your podcasts. For more Nevers-related content, you can find us on the web at hbothenevers.com, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at hbothenevers and at the Nevers Podcast, and also at the Nevers Podcast without the A on Twitter. Any comments or questions can be sent to theneverspodcast@gmail.com. Please also rate and review our podcast and help us reach more listeners. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Chirag, for joining me today and sharing your thoughts on the 5th episode. So where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me just dating in a chrysalis underground. Thank you for listening.
And I'm Laura, and you can find me on Instagram at LauraJP1721. And until next week, this has been the Nevers Podcast. Bye-bye.
This episode of the Nevers Podcast was written, produced, and edited by Matthew Yamanashi. at Culture Inject Studios. The intro and outro music was produced by Guilherme Moraes. We are more than just a podcast. We're a fan community. You can keep up to date on the Nevers and chat with other fans by visiting hbothenevers.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search HBO The Nevers, all one word, and click that follow button. The Nevers Podcast is not endorsed by Mutant Enemy, Warner Media Entertainment, or any of its subsidiaries, including Home Box Office, HBO, and is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. The Nevers and all names, pictures, and audio clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.